It's time to go into business for yourself. Get ready for another episode of the Franchise Academy Podcast. Education, insight, and inspiration. Here's your host, small business and franchise expert, Tom Scarda.
Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Academy Podcast. Great show today. Got Gary Occhiogrosso with me. We're going to talk about the new wave of business in post-pandemic 2020. So welcome to the Franchise Academy. This is a place for everything franchising, everything you ever wanted to know. I'm a franchise consultant. I match people with opportunities based on skills, personality, goals, kind of like the eHarmony of business is what I like to call it. And I help people figure out if franchising is for them or not. And I got to tell you, I tell 40% of the people who contact me, do not go down this road because it is definitely not for everyone. So you got to really be careful about the kind of concepts you're looking at, what you're thinking about. So we're here to help make sure you're going down the right path. So today I have Gary Occhiogrosso with me, who is kind of a guru restaurant business franchise guy. He is the founder of Franchise Growth Solutions, and he's a Northeast guy like me. And we have a lot to talk about today. So welcome, Gary.
Well, Tom, first, thank you very much. And let me just, put a thank you out to you for everything you do in the franchise business, because it's very important what you do in helping people sort out what they'd like to do if they're thinking about going into a franchise business.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very, very much. So here we're sitting. I don't like to date these podcasts because they live forever on the internet, but we're in mid-June. 2020 and pandemic. I mean, I just got a letter today. New York State is going into phase 2 of reopening, so things are looking good. A lot of people are saying, "Hey, welcome to the new norm," and how are you going to run your business? How are you going to do your job? So, what's the new norm in franchise restaurants right now?
Okay, so let me first not overreact to this. I hate the whole concept of new norm. As I tell people, I'm going to interrupt you when I hear that term, new norm. There's no such thing as a new norm. Now, why do I say that? Because then people will kind of convince themselves through the self-speak and the narrative that this is the way it's going to be forever. And I prefer to use the term, some people say it's semantics, but I prefer to use the term temporary norm. Because if you go back to the beginning of when this whole pandemic started, I guess mid-March, everything was, quote, the new norm, but the new norm only lasted a week or two because it was constantly changing.
Or a day.
So the new wasn't really new. It was temporary. And now we're in the temporary new norm of reopening and getting things back to perhaps the way they were prior to COVID-19, and how will that look? And as you pointed out, New York State is opening up in certain areas. I'm in New Jersey. Certain areas are opening up. So I think it's important that as a restaurateur, a retail operator, a franchisee, a franchisor, or a customer, that we go into this temporary norm with the right frame of mind that, hey, maybe I don't like the idea that I've got to call for an appointment to get my hair cut and they'll only let 2 people in at a time. But I'm not going to accept that as the new norm. I'm going to just tell myself, hey, that's temporary. In a month, a week, a year, that might be different. So that's why I kind of jump on that term. I don't want people to kind of stew in this idea that this is the way it always will be.
And I appreciate that. I mean, I always try to take that glass half full mentality myself. And so I really appreciate that. And I learned from a mentor of mine who was really kind of a guru in like motivational speaking. His name is Dr. John Diekman, and he lives in Manhattan. And he said, your words have power. And they do. The way you address someone, the way you label something, it has power. But not to dwell on that. So on the post-pandemic, they're calling it BC, which was before Corona, and now I don't know if this is AD, whatever that would stand for. But what I like, and as we talk, offline all the time, it's exciting about some of the new things that are happening. So there's a stricter type of sanitation method, sanitizing tables and the utensils and dishes and what have you. But I love, first of all, I want to say that maybe the average person listening to a podcast doesn't realize that restaurateurs and many restaurant employees go through safety handling, health department type stuff, avoiding foodborne illnesses. So we're already ready for this. It's not really a big deal, but it's more about spacing people, right? What are you seeing that's new?
It's an interesting, again, my take on it, to give your audience a visual. It's as if the retail, and let's talk about restaurants because that's kind of the arena I play in, but it's as if it was a forest that burned down and you say, oh, wow, that's terrible. The forest burned down. I'm sensitive to it. I'm sorrowful. But now I see all these new trees growing and this new greenery coming up. Those are the opportunities. So I prefer to look at it that way. With respect to, different methodologies or other methodologies in the restaurant business, I guess first I will tell you that in my opinion, being in the restaurant business and understanding food handling procedures and sanitation, proper sanitation, and just the things that restaurateurs go through if they're operating properly, I'm going to tell you, I don't want to say in most because I don't want to insult anybody, but in many cases, restaurant kitchens, even pre-pandemic, were operated in a cleaner, more sanitary way than a lot of people operate their own home kitchens. Okay, because at home you don't have to follow the rules of how long something can stay out. Do I need to sanitize that surface? You don't have to do that at home, but in a restaurant you have to do that. So
how many times I don't want to cut you off, but how many people out there cut up a chicken before they cook it and then use that same knife to cut some celery?
Ooh, I see that all the time. I also see. I don't want to out any friends or things, but I'll see people take raw chicken with tongs and put it on a grill and then use the same tongs to kind of turn the chicken instead of using it only until the chicken is seared and then get a new set. Okay, because you take that cooked chicken off the grill with the same tongs that it was raw. Listen, you're not always going to contaminate it. Not every chicken has a disease on it, all right? I don't want to go overboard on that, but you absolutely increase your chances. So if you want to play Russian roulette, be my guest. Just don't serve it to me. All right. So I guess on the premise that, again, restaurateurs are operating under stricter guidelines to begin with. Now, when you look at some of these other things in the opening, it makes sense. I think how it's presented to the world is critical in how folks like you and I, and maybe you and I are not like kind of the average restaurant customer because of the business we're in, but how the average customer sees it and how the restaurateur or the retailer is going to instill confidence in their customer to come back. Because it's one thing for me to sit here and say, well, restaurants operate, fine, and maybe because I know that, I'm in kitchens all the time, but as the average customer, maybe I don't know that. So in addition to putting some other things in place, I think the narrative and the optics, the education, and the confidence-inspiring methods are equally important in getting your business back.
Right. And it's all optics. I mean, it doesn't matter. But I do want to share a quick story. This past week, I was driving back from Denver to New York. My son was moving home, so we had a car with a U-Haul trailer. We hit the Indiana border, and they were open for in-dine restaurants. Mm-hmm. So what's right off the exit? Cracker Barrel. Not the best food in the world, but I was definitely ready for some home-cooked kind of feeling And so we went to Cracker Barrel, and I was blown away and impressed by how they handled their dining area. It was phenomenal. First of all the customers and the employees were respectful of everyone. So nobody was, huddled together. But when you sat down in the restaurant, it reminded me the dining area was like a checkerboard where we would sit down and there's a table next to us that was empty and then another party and then another empty table. So when a party left, they would sanitize the heck out of that table, up the top, the bottom, the chairs, and then they would seat the next party at the table next to it, let that other one kind of, incubate in whatever solution they're using, and then do vice versa. I thought it was great, and everybody was happy. We had a great meal. Really, they don't want you to linger because there's people waiting because they only have half capacity. But I just want to say that's what it's going to look like right now.
It's important, Tom. It's not only important for the safety of the team members and the guests, but it's important in the demonstration of the commitment by the company or the restaurateur to the entire sanitation issue that people want to see. Now, again, getting back to this temporary norm piece, restaurants cannot operate that way forever. Now, I'm not talking about the sanitation piece. I'm talking about, 50% capacity, 70% capacity, 30% capacity, because they're not paying 50% rent. They're not paying 50% for their food. They're not paying 50% for their labor. So we have to temper the reality of running a business with the risk-reward factor. And people always have the option of staying home and not going into the restaurant. Now, I don't really want to go there because, unfortunately, a lot of people have turned this crisis into a political thesis, and I don't want to go there, okay? I just want to say that if you don't want to go to a restaurant, don't go, period. Don't go. If you want to go, great. Make sure they're practicing the proper safety procedures. But do know that at some point, if you've gotten used to sitting one table apart from everyone, do know that at some point, that's not going to be the case. And you're either going to like that or not like that. And if you don't like it, don't go. And if you do like it, it'll probably be because you're informed in the sense that the ability or the contagion is really under control, or perhaps there's some therapeutic measure or something that's going to allow people to feel comfortable to do that. But I just want to state that this whole 50% thing cannot last forever. And I think on a positive note, because again, I don't want to get preachy here, although that's kind of my MO, I will tell you that I think it is critical that restaurateurs do the things that you mentioned, like, bathing the table and sanitizing solution, because the welfare of the guests, the welfare of the employee has got to be first and foremost in not only in the mind's eye of the guest, because it has to be more than optics, it has to be real. But I think that kind of plays into some of the other issues that are connected to this reopening. Just to give you a quick connection to that, I was on one of my podcasts recently. I had an attorney on, and he was talking about, what are the legal ramifications of reopening? How does this affect your employees? How does it affect your customers? Can an employee sue you if they get sick on the premises? How would you prove that they got sick there? How would you prove that they couldn't? What if you ask your employees to come back and someone is fearful, or versus someone might have an underlying condition? What's their ability to kind of deny coming back? What's the employer's position if they know someone has an underlying condition versus someone who's 24 years old and, strong as an ox? Well, they can't discriminate. So I think when you look at a lot of that stuff, it further underscores why the practices you're talking about need to be in effect, because not only in the real world, not to infect anyone, but kind of in this litigious world that unfortunately we live in, you're kind of protecting yourself from the guest or team member kind of acting against you, God forbid something should, they should get sick. So it's all tied together. It's very tangled up, but it's all very important. I don't believe there's any one thing per se that may be more important than the other. I think, as I've often told my clients, they hate when I do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Everything touches everything else. Okay, so that's how I would comment on your statement.
Yeah, no, it's true. Everything does affect the next thing. So, the hip bone is connected to the leg bone. It's just the way it is.
Absolutely. I interviewed someone who was in Georgia, and they opened up 4 of their restaurants, I guess probably about a month ago now at this point. I don't recall when Georgia opened up. And one of the things that she had mentioned to me, in addition to the things that you talked about that you saw at Cracker Barrel, was how they got the word out, how they marketed the restaurant. They didn't want to kind of send up a woohoo kind of flag saying, hey, we're open, come on in, everything is good. They wanted to be sensitive. People lost people, people know people who died. Okay. It was tragic. People have a lot of, maybe post-traumatic stress disorder over this. So they didn't want to go out there, on their social platforms and right away start ringing the bell saying, come on in, everything's fine. They wanted to be respectful. They wanted to be sensitive. So even their marketing was geared towards a sensitivity and an understanding of how we're going to get people to come back in. And 2 of the examples that she gave me was on their social media platforms and on their email list. They only began to advertise, for the lack of a better word, to folks who were already their customers, the people who were in their loyalty program and people who knew them, trusted them, could communicate back, because they felt like those people already know who they are, so they could have conversation, even if on text, about what they were doing. So that was the first piece before they then gradually over weeks started to expand upon that. Again, being respectful, being sensitive. Additionally, they wanted to take all the things that you just mentioned, the methods and the cleaning and everything else, and they wanted to make that very visual, in the sense that when you walked into the restaurant, now I haven't personally visited the restaurant, they're down in Georgia, I haven't been down there. But the way it was described to me, and it made perfectly good sense, is, there was a greeter at the door. If you wanted a mask, they'd give you a mask. All of the employees were wearing gloves and masks. Now, it's a full service place, but kind of a casual full service place. So they gave you the option after you ordered that you could go up to the counter and get your own food if you didn't want the server to walk over to the table, or the server could come over to the table and kind of drop the food. There was hand sanitizer. I'm not sure if she said on every table, maybe she did, but certainly those those stand-up hand sanitizers that we've all become so familiar with in the supermarkets were throughout the restaurant. Again, not only necessary, but a very clear visual demonstration to the guest. Hey, we take this seriously. We take you seriously. We take our employees seriously. And you could have full faith and confidence that when you walk into our restaurant, we're going to do everything that we need to do to keep you safe while we're delivering an enjoyable experience for you and your family in our restaurant.
I love it. And there's a lot of things that people just don't realize. Like even myself, I'm sitting in Cracker Barrel and I'm like, oh, I need some salt. There's no condiments on the table. It's like little things like that. It's like, wow.
No, it's very important. And I just see that, again, temporarily. Now, temporary, again, might be a week, might be a month, might be a year, but certainly not forever. And that's not to say that there won't be things about the restaurant business that have changed forever, but have changed because of opportunities, maybe because certain restaurants had to pivot in how they've been serving customers over the last couple of months.
Oh, yeah.
That will change forever.
Absolutely. The thing that comes to my mind is actually 2 different things. One is delivery services and how we have become really accustomed to that. And it reminds me of, let's call it 20 to 30 years ago when no one had drive-thrus, but then they realized the incremental increase in business if you had a drive-thru. So now you kind of have to have a drive-thru. Otherwise, you're absolutely insane if you don't.
Yeah.
There's that, and there's something called ghost kitchens I wanted to pick your brain about.
Okay, well, I will tell you, Tom, you know, my last statement about restaurateurs seeing some of the pivots that they've had to do during the pandemic. Now we can view those as opportunities and maybe go, why didn't I ever think of that? Why wasn't I doing that before? So when you look at businesses, and I have clients that kind of run the gamut in terms of whether they're full service, fast casual, different types of brands. So if you look at, you know, the pizza concepts, maybe not most, but many pizza concepts, they're already equipped for delivery. So for them, it was just, let's ratchet this up. Okay, we're going to be doing more of it, but they already were doing it. So the mechanism was in place. The other piece to that is a lot of fast casuals, especially fast casuals in urban centers, New York City in particular, where, you know, the workers kind of dump out of the buildings at noon and they scatter, or they're ordering and wanting the food delivery, is the third-party ordering platforms that you mentioned, and we all know who they are. A lot of those things, delivery and third-party ordering platforms, were not being utilized in the suburbs, or maybe not being utilized to the full extent in the suburbs. But given the fact that most of the office workers were now working from home and live in the suburbs, all of a sudden, my customers live somewhere else. So that's not to say you would deliver food from Manhattan to Hauppauge, Long Island, but it certainly allowed restaurateurs in the middle of Long Island to now look at this and go, not only do we have to do this, if we want to stay in business, we have to do this. But now that things are opening up, let's continue to do this, because there's a lot of equity in offering this service. Now, just really briefly, just a sidebar, the third-party ordering platforms charge hefty commissions, although I will say in New York City, we are fortunate enough to have the advocacy of a gentleman named Andrew Rigi, who heads up the New York Hospitality Alliance, who has beaten back these big tech companies to actually hold the commissions down, and some other things that are, you know, really helpful to the restaurateurs. That being said, the other side of the equation is these third-party ordering platforms in many cases are marketing platforms. People who may never have found you now find you because they're on Grubhub or Seamless or Uber Eats. So now all of a sudden you're there. So, you know, philosophically, I'm not saying, you know, specifically on your P&L, but philosophically, if you're looking at your advertising line on your P&L and the commissions you pay to third-party ordering platforms, you go, well, some of that might be considered advertising, but that's hard to measure. I will also tell you that if you look at the aggregate percentage, because some of them are at 30 and some of them are at 10. If you look at the aggregate percentage in your mix of business with third-party ordering platforms, it's not always the top end. It's somewhere down in the middle in terms of what the true cost is. All that being said, I think what COVID has taught restaurateurs and taught people in the boomer generation, me, okay, although, again, I'm a bad example because I'm in the business, so I know about these things. But I think the boomer generation, who wasn't ordering online and using their phone to pay and doing all of that, guess what? The same way Facebook was only for college kids 10, 12 years ago, and now it's for old people, okay? I think third-party ordering platforms, which were historically, perhaps, I don't know the history, the measurement of it, but just my visual is that younger people, millennials, Gen Xers, Gen Zs, used it more than boomers. Now, all of a sudden, the boomer generation is open to it. So if you're a local restaurateur and you're not using third-party ordering platforms properly, as you said, I think it's insane. So I think that's a big opportunity that will be forever out of COVID. And I think, again, I mean, I'm trying to find, pearls here and a lot of empty oysters, but that to me is a big one, Your second point, if I recall, because I talk so much, I forget what you said, but I think you brought up ghost kitchens, correct?
Yeah. This fascinates me. Explain just the premise of what a ghost kitchen is, and then what you're seeing now post-COVID.
Okay, well, let's just take a quick jump back to my last statement. If you think about your local Italian restaurant in the town you live in, for the last 2 months, if they weren't doing call ahead and pick up, and a lot of restaurants weren't doing that. They were only doing the third-party delivery, or they were delivering on their own. That, in effect, is a ghost kitchen. It's just the kitchen. Now, that's kind of a sketchy explanation, so let me kind of clear it up a little bit. A ghost kitchen, essentially, if you think about urban centers, and that's a lot of where this started in urban centers, downtown, midtown Manhattan, let's say, midtown Chicago, Miami, LA. If I'm ordering my food, I'm an office worker. I'm a young office worker, and I'm ordering my food 3 out of 5 days online, probably on my phone, and paying for it. I'm never going to the restaurant. The food just magically shows up at my office, okay? That entity producing the food may not have a storefront. Their entire brand may live online on a third-party ordering platform or on a really cool website. So I'll give you an example, although there's another component to the example I'm going to give you. But if I had a commercial kitchen and I was located on the west side of Manhattan, I might build 5 websites. One, I would have a Mexican restaurant with a name and a menu and branding and advertising on social media and be on Grubhub. I might have an Italian restaurant. I might have a farm-to-table restaurant. I might have an Asian restaurant. They only live online. Because as an urban dweller or as an urban worker, I'm probably only ordering online. So it doesn't matter whether there's a place that I could go and sit down. That's a ghost kitchen. So right. To kind of bring that into kind of real world, and again, I'm giving you kind of the morphed ghost kitchen of what we saw restaurants doing during the pandemic. Then there's kind of this hybrid. I have an associate, a friend, actually, I wrote an article, interviewed him for one of my articles in Forbes. He runs an operation called the Sous-Vide Kitchen, which is down on 23rd, just east of Park. And he started it as a restaurant. But what he did, and it's absolutely brilliant, was for those of us who are familiar with entities such as urban space in New York, you walk in and there's 4 or 5, call them booths. It kind of looks like maybe an old school mall food court, but with a very modern look to it. And you've got your Asian, you've got pizza, you've got whatever. And they're usually very, very kind of kitschy, startup, food trucky type brands. They're typically not what you see in a food court. You're not going to see the Sbarro and the McDonald's and the Chick-fil-A. You're going to see, Joe's Hot Tacos and, Mary's Donuts. And usually they're food truck operators to begin with, or small operators. And that's typically called a food hall. Now, what Brian has done is he's created a virtual food hall. So now you walk into his space, which was formerly a single branded restaurant, and there's tables and chairs and decor and all of that going on all around. But there's no, okay, what is the name of this restaurant other than the name on the door, Sous-Vide Kitchen, because that's the cooking method. You walk up to a kiosk, a full-size kiosk, the type that you see pretty much in McDonald's, not the little ones on the counter. And the first thing that appears when you touch the screen are 4 or 5 different restaurants. Mexican, Asian, Vietnamese, American, organic, a salad concept. Now you touch it and the brand opens up. You learn a little bit about the brand. You see the menu. You order. Swipe your credit card. You move to the left, as the soup Nazi used to say, okay? Or did he say move to the right? No, move to the left, okay? And you get a text, or you get a number, you get a receipt, what have you. Bang, here's your food. All under one roof. Now, again, Brian has kind of elevated it to a spot where 5 people can go into one location, because not everybody wants to dine alone at their desk for lunch. We're talking about lunch. Sometimes you want to go out with the people you work with. But if I want pizza and you want a sandwich and so-and-so wants a salad, what are we going to do? All split up and then meet back at the office? No, you can go to his virtual food hall, order what you want, and share a meal together. Now, again, the dine-in capacity or the dine-in component in New York City still is not there. So that's really a ghost kitchen, where you're utilizing your kitchen to service your guests via an online platform, whether it's just your website or third party, whether you're delivering or using an Uber Eats or Grubhub, however you're executing, that's a whole different topic. And that's what's meant by a ghost kitchen. And the opportunities there, in addition to on the guest side, where folks like you and I can enjoy 5 different restaurants from one trusted provider. Mm-hmm. As a restaurant or as an entrepreneur, if I want to start a restaurant, maybe I don't have the bucks to open up, a full-blown restaurant. Maybe I just need to rent or lease, because now they're doing shared ghost kitchens. It's even morphed into that. Right. Maybe I just need a ghost kitchen to create my brand and test my brand and get customers, and then maybe I open up an actual bricks and mortar space. So there's tremendous, tremendous opportunity born out of this terrible, terrible crisis disaster that we are calling a pandemic, COVID-19, whatever name you want to give it. There are opportunities there. Sorry, again, didn't mean to get long-winded, but just wanted to give you a good explanation.
No, that is absolutely fascinating. I absolutely love what's going on with all that stuff. And it's just a testament to, American ingenuity and the stuff that we do. So there's no reason to, cry over empty oysters. Yep. But look for those pearls, man. Keep on looking. They're out there. So, Gary, I want to thank you for being on. This is phenomenal. You have so much content. You have so much. You're a leader in franchising. How can people follow you? What's the best way to get in touch with you? People have questions and find out more about Franchise Growth Solutions.
Well, I appreciate your kind words. Thank you. I guess the simplest way would be to connect with me on LinkedIn, because all of my contact information is there. You can go to the Franchise Growth Solutions website, and there's a way to contact me there. Those are probably the simplest ways here that, I would say contact me through LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can follow our podcast, Mastermind Minutes, which is on Spotify. I have a pretty big social footprint. You can just Google my name. I'm easy to find.
That's great. And I'll put some of the stuff on franchiseacademy.com so people can find you there easily. So check that out. And Gary, thanks a million again for being on the show. And maybe you and I will get together and get to have lunch or dinner together face to face.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Tom. Be well. Have a great one.
All right. Thank you. Be well. God bless.
This has been another episode of the Franchise Academy Podcast. For more info, go to our website, thefranchiseacademypodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to Tom Scarda's YouTube channel for educational videos on franchising, education, insight, and inspiration.